So my name is Bas Lansdorp. I'm from a small company called Mars One. There's just 5 people working there. But Mars One wants to put humans on Mars in 2023. And I'm going to tell you about that. I'm first going to tell you why, then going to tell you how, and then I'm going to tell you where we are now and the next steps that we're going to take. First, why? So, I think all of you are interested in space exploration, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And there are a few things, a few reasons why people should go to space. For me, the most important reason is I just want to do it. I'll get back to that later. But there's a few other important things. I think every human being is curious about what is behind the horizon. The new Mars rover is called Curiosity for a reason. Everybody is interested, and especially when people are involved. When this happened, everybody on the planet watched. Everybody that had access to a screen watched this happen. And of course there is scientific research, which is extremely important. And there is also one of my important reasons personally, to inspire, to show people that if you really want to do something and you work hard and you try hard, it can be achieved. And I think that this is something very important to work for. So my own personal interest for Mars started in 1997 when this little rover landed. And it immediately triggered me to think, before that actually I wasn't so interested in space. I had space Lego, but that was about it. And at this moment I thought, wow, could humans walk on Mars? And that's when I became interested in that. So I did some research, I read everything there was to read, and I quickly found out that actually they can't, because this is extremely difficult. Taking off from Mars, departing from Mars is something that we cannot do with the current technology. We don't have rockets big enough to land a return vehicle on Mars. You need to take all the supplies, or you need to dock in orbit, but then there has to be something in orbit. It's just too complex with the current technology to go back. And I was 20 years old when I came up with this plan, 15 years ago. And the first thing I thought was, why go back? If you're going somewhere, why not stay there? It's a whole planet. As long as you can, wow, as long as you can feed yourself, as long as you have oxygen to breathe and water to drink, there's a whole planet to explore. I don't want to go back. And as soon as you forget about the return mission, then rockets are suddenly already big enough, or almost big enough. So this is the Falcon 9 rocket, and SpaceX is building a Falcon Heavy. They're flight testing it hopefully next year. And that rocket would be big enough to take all the components for a stay on Mars mission. We have the ability to land rovers on Mars. People are always exaggerating how many Mars missions fail, but actually of all the rovers that have landed, only one has failed. Of all the landers that have been tried, only one has failed. So we know pretty well how to land on Mars. And also SpaceX, you probably all know that they docked to the ISS. The Dragon capsule has been designed for use on Mars. So I've discussed with SpaceX, could we use this technology? And so I've visited them and talked with their engineers and business developers. And I've discussed using their Dragon capsule and their rocket to put our missions on Mars. So life support systems, they exist. They've been tested for a long time. They've been used on the moon. They are being used in the space station. We have the suits. There's a lot of technology that already exists. And there's a lot of experience in robotics. So all the components that you would need to put humans on Mars actually exist, as long as you don't require people to fly back. And so what does our mission plan look like? We want to land a demonstration mission unmanned, so only cargo on board, in 2016. In 2018 we want to send a rover to Mars that's going to drive around and find the best location. So we know of course the general area, but it's going to find the best exact spot with enough water content. In 2020, we're sending 6 missions to Mars, another supply mission, 2 life support units, and 2 living units, and a spare rover. And the 2 rovers are going to put all the components close together. Of course, they'll land kilometers apart. The rovers will put them close together, and they'll deploy the solar panels. They'll also inflate the inflatable sections of the habitats, and they will feed the life support units with sand to evaporate water from it, such that before the humans launch in 2022, it will be confirmed that there is water in the tanks, oxygen in the tanks, breathable atmosphere in the habitat. Then in 2022, the humans will launch, and I already told you the date. In 2023, they will land, and there will be humans on Mars. Of course, they will begin with building the base, so they have to install a lot of components. They have to install additional solar panels. We've designed the mission around solar energy because we don't need to produce the propellant to fly back, but also because a nuclear reactor for Mars just doesn't exist. So we've designed this mission using only existing technology, and we've met with all the companies that we need to produce these technologies. And in 2020, we're sending 4 more people to Mars every 2 years. So in 2025, it might look like something like this. Well, the big important question, how much does this cost? It will cost about 6 billion to send the first 4 people to Mars, and about 4 billion for each additional crew that we send every 2 years. And that sounds like a lot of money. And obviously it is a lot of money, but if this will really happen, and I already mentioned the moon landings and everybody watching this, if this would really happen, the whole world will watch. Is there another event that the whole world watches? There's the London Olympics. Did you know? I didn't know that before I started working on Mars One. I didn't know that in just 3 weeks of broadcasting, the International Olympic Committee, so not London, but the International Olympic Committee, has a revenue between 3 and 4 billion US dollars just from broadcasting rights and sponsors. And did you know that the Olympics actually cost between 7 and 12 billion US dollars? So that actually means that London could have organized a manned mission to Mars, according to my calculations, instead of doing the Olympics. I don't understand it. So I already... So how are we going to finance this mission? Because we're not tied to any government. We want to do this on our own. And we're going to finance it by involving the audience of the entire planet. So everybody in the world is invited to join us on this mission to Mars. Everybody can apply to become one of the astronauts. So it doesn't matter if you're from Holland, Belgium, USA, China, or Ghana. Everybody can apply, and everybody has a chance to be one of the first 4 people on Mars. And the second way we'll involve the audience is by allowing the audience to decide who they want to see on Mars. So it will be like idols on Mars, if you put it in a very down-to-earth way. And of course, our experts will first decide of all the applicants. We're expecting a few million applicants when we do this. In the UK, for instance, there's 180,000 applications for X Factor. So we expect the same amounts of people for this. So our experts will first decide who is fit to go to Mars and who is not, because we need the best of the best people to go to Mars. But there might be hundreds or thousands of people who are good enough to be one of the first 4 people on Mars. So we'll ask the audience to decide who would you like to see on Mars, who is our ambassador on Mars. Then the people that we select, they'll be selected in 10 groups of 4, and they will go into training, and the training will also be something where the audience is invited to participate, to watch how these potential astronauts perform in an analog situation where they will be put to stress, where things will break, where they will have hardship, to test them if they are really the right people to go to Mars. And finally, of course, when we launch, when we land, and the first few weeks on Mars, literally the whole planet will watch. So where are we now? We have conceptual design studies performed by our suppliers. Sorry, that's the next slide. That's what we want to do. We have a good technical plan that has been discussed with all our suppliers. And these are the major aerospace companies of the world. There's just 3 here, but we've talked to 7 of them all around the world. And we've discussed those plans with them, and we have asked, okay, we want this component from you. So a major component like the launcher or the lander or the rover or the transit unit. Can you build it? And how much money do you need for that? And we've discussed those with them. And we already have a good team of ambassadors and advisors. So for instance, top left is Gerard het Hoofd, a Dutch Nobel Prize winner. Top right is Pascal Ehrenfreund of the NASA Astrobiology Institute. Bottom left is Paul Reumer, who's our media advisor. He's the guy who invented Big Brother. And bottom right is Norbert Kraft. He's a former Japanese space agency and NASA crew selection and health expert. And fortunately, I can say that since a few weeks we have a number of sponsors who actually believe, most of these sponsors are, of course we sell this to our sponsors because they're getting so much publicity, but they actually do it because they think that it's time to do something like this. It's time for the world to have something exciting, something inspiring, and that's actually why they've sponsored us. So what are our plans for the next year? We want to finance the conceptual design studies by our suppliers, and we're already in discussion with a couple of investors who are interested to help us with that. And as soon as we have those conceptual design studies funded, we want to announce the astronaut selection procedure such that we can create a big media buzz where everybody in the world will know, whoa, people are going to Mars and I can apply. And that's what we want everybody to be involved in this and everybody to feel that this is something that's really going to happen. So, can you help? Yes, you can. The most important thing for us is to know that enough people are interested. So we need to show to our potential investors and to our potential sponsors that people care about this. So do all these things. And maybe more importantly, tell everybody you know that something like this is happening. Tell them to take a look at our website to see how real our plans already are. And tell them to help us make this possible. So this is almost the end of my presentation. Is there life on Mars? Well, let's make sure there is. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? Yeah.
Thanks for this wonderful talk, and I congratulate you already inside the adventure. I think it's great what you're doing, and just a couple of remarks that I had when I listened to your talk. One is you should rethink the thing with the solar panels, because this, what you showed here, is about 10 kilowatts, and I've seen a nuclear reactor. It's not a reactor, it's a nuclear thermal device, about this size, like a suitcase, produce 100 kilowatts of electrical power. So on Mars, the sun is a tiny little spot in the sky. So nuclear power, I think, is a very powerful thing on Mars. Next thing is perhaps you also want to look at using in situ resource utilization. Perhaps you find out when you are on Mars for 1 Martian year, meaning 2 years on Earth, you can actually make the propellant that you would need to go back. So in the end, you can.
Yeah, two good questions. So solar panel is important for 2 reasons. First of all, a nuclear reactor for space does not exist yet. I mean, there are devices that do 100 kilowatts, but they're not space qualified. And before you will get them space qualified. Okay, well, in any case, even if you have it, I think there's 2 good reasons not to do it. First of all, you'll have problems launching it. There will always be people who complain, I don't want this launched over my head. And the second reason, I think, is also important. When you're on Mars, you want to be a sustainable, you want to show to the world that you can be a sustainable society on a new planet. Because people are already, if you have a plan without nuclear power, there's people who are going to say, should we ruin another planet? And if you're bringing a nuclear device, you'll only strengthen their case. So, of course, we would love to have a megawatt on Mars, but we don't need it. And what I showed you is not all. There's 3,000 square meters of solar panels that we want to deploy on Mars. So there's quite a lot. And your second point was propellant for the return mission. Well, first of all, I think a very good reason not to do a return mission is because there are enough people who are not interested in a return mission. If NASA would do a return mission in 50 years, then they would have to make sure that there is also the possibility for the astronauts to stay 2 years longer, because if they're, imagine they get into their return vehicle, they push the button and nothing happens. You need to have a backup plan, so there will be the ability for them to stay 2 years longer, or maybe even 4 years longer. And I'm sure that if they have this ability, you have people on Mars, they have this ability to stay 2 years longer, they won't come back. So why do a return mission? It's more expensive, it's more complex, and there's enough people who are interested to stay there. Oh yeah, sorry, of course we do, yeah.
It's not more expensive, it's not more complex, that's the whole thing.
Well, that's not true. It's always more complex to do something more than you didn't have to do. And of course we do use in situ resources for water, for nitrogen, for oxygen, and for plant growth, etc. Yep, thank you. I think this man was in the start already.
Question, what about the human flaw of feeling homesick and this thing turning into a nasty sci-fi movie? What about that?
That's a very good point. So I actually believe that crew selection and keeping the crew healthy will be a bigger challenge than the technical aspects. And well, I've discussed this in great detail with many people who know a lot about this, with, for instance, Norbert Kraft, but also Ray Kess, one of our new advisors. And what we will do is something completely different than what NASA is doing. We will train our astronauts for about 9 years before they depart. And in this time, they will be in an analog environment once for 3 months every 2 years. And we will put them to through any possible situation that they can occur on Mars, and also things that we really don't want to occur on Mars, and give them enormous stress and see how they cope with that. And you can select people very carefully for this aspect. You can train them for it. You can see how they, if they are prone to get homesick. Well, what do you do if things go wrong in the winter in Antarctica? You also cannot do anything. Yeah, but it's just as impossible to reach them. So, of course, there are downsides to having a one-way mission, but a return mission is simply not possible. It's not going to happen for a very long time, and this is true exploration. This is not going to the ISS and back and doing that another time and another time. This is something that has never been done before, and huge risks will be taken. And in the first Apollo capsule, 3 people died, and they continued to program. Many people, I think, before that happened, would have thought, if people die, it's going to stop immediately. But they continued, and I think everybody agreed that it was necessary to continue. And this is really the next giant leap for mankind. It's really going to a new planet, settling humans there, and finding a new base for a human settlement. And well, yeah, of course, if there's no return mission, they will die on Mars. And I think having children, one of the most frequently asked questions on our website, the first one is, can I go? We're getting hundreds of people who, we don't have an application open, but we get a lot of people who want to go. And of course there's 12-year-old girls, there's 75-year-old men, but there's also people with a PhD, people who work at NASA. There's very serious people who apply for, who say that they're interested. Those people don't apply. They say, we're very interested, keep us posted. So you ask about, so the second mostly asked question is, can they have children on Mars? And, well, technically, of course, yes, they can, but anyone who wants to become a parent has to consider, is this the right place for me to have children and the right time? I think if you're in a small settlement like this with just 4 adults, it will be extremely dangerous. And there will be redundancy, but only to a certain limit. If I were a parent, I would not want my child to be born in this place. Maybe after 4 years, maybe 4 years later, or 10 years later, or 15 years later, but the first 4 are most certainly not going to, well, the responsible people will select them for that, and they should be responsible enough to know that it's not the right place for them to have children. Anyone?
Well, I believe there are a lot of people who wish to go, but I'm a bit worried about the people who will stay on Earth and view those people living on Mars and die there at some point or get ill or something. What do you expect from the people on Earth having to see those people live far away?
Well, of course, nobody has to see it. It's just we believe that a lot of people will be interested to see it, and as long as death is an essential part of life, and of course we will do. It will be a technically very robust mission. There will be a lot of redundancy. For instance, we'll test the lander, the human lander. We'll test it 8 times with cargo inside before the humans land in the identical vehicle. So much more testing than, for instance, the moon lander, which was never tested on the moon before humans landed in it. So there will be a lot more safety, or we will have as much as possible safety, but there's always the chance that something can go wrong. But again, this is not just a regular TV show. It's not Idols where the winner gets a record contract. This is, in return, they get to go to Mars. And that's also why we feel that a lot of people will be interested to watch. Does it answer your question? Yeah. Well, of course, there will be medical facilities, so we will make sure that the most common things that you can treat, for instance, without an MRI machine, because that's something we won't have on Mars. But of course, there will be good medical facilities, and we will cooperate with medical experts to make sure that the right stuff is there. But they will take a giant leap backwards in time from the medical point of view. But that's also something that the explorers did in the old days. When they sailed across the ocean to discover new lands, they also took a giant leap back in time, because on those ships there were also less medical facilities than in the city where they came from, and that's it's an important thing. And the astronauts will be smart people who know what they're doing. They will make a rational choice, but yeah, they will have higher risks. Of course, it will be more risky than staying at home. And for people, if something goes really wrong, don't forget that we will be training with those astronauts for 10 years before they depart. So they will not just be, right now they're just a picture in the screen, but then they will be our colleagues and our friends. So if something dramatically goes dramatically wrong, of course we're not going to put it on TV, so nobody at home is going to see that. This is not about the TV event, it's about getting humans to Mars. And the only way that we feel this is possible is by involving the entire world as an audience in this adventure. So of course, it will be completely different than Big Brother. For instance, why do we need to we don't want to put cameras in the bedroom, because we're not interested to see how astronauts sleep, we're interested to see how they discover Mars. Okay, thanks. Do you want to ask your radiation question?
No, I'm still thinking about where to start with my criticism.
Thank you for the comment.
Hi, my question is, you said it's not like Big Brother, or like Idols, where the people finally get a contract. I think it actually is, since they get the single opportunity to go there. But my main question is, how do you want to sustain this? Since when the great explorers went to across the sea and they started a settlement in the US, what's now the US, they didn't go with 4. They went with a larger community. You will need to sustain this for a long period of time before you actually have a real settlement there. You can't call 4 people a settlement. So aren't you afraid that the funding will eventually dry up and you have 4, 8, 10, 12, I don't know how many people there, that you can no longer sustain?
I asked exactly this question to Paul Reumer, and after talking, Paul Reumer, the inventor of Big Brother, because he gave me the idea of financing it with public involvement. And after that, I've asked it to every media company that I've talked to, and they've all said the same thing. I actually said everybody watched Neil Armstrong, and after that, fewer and fewer people cared about that. And they've convinced me that if you make this a mission about the human part of exploration of Mars, so it should not be about what chemicals are in the soil, or has there been water on Mars, or what's the history of Mars, or the solar system. That's not what, and that's what we are interested in, but it's not what 99% of the people are interested in. 99% of the people are interested to see what happens. Are they going to have children? Is something going to get married? Is someone going to get married? Do they succeed in building this next part of the outpost? That's what people are interested in, to see the struggle, because it will of course be a struggle, it will be hard, and to see what is the next step. And everybody that I've talked to in the media industry has convinced me that people will be watching this in 50 years if this really happens. And of course it's possible that by then the interest will die down. But there will always be the selection show in which a lot of people will be interested, because as long as you cannot afford a ticket to go to space, a lot of people are going to participate. And if people can afford a ticket to go to space, then we can also afford to send them resupplies, because by then it will be affordable. No, not really. There's a lot of things that I didn't explain, so please take a look at their website too. So we'll select 10 groups of 4, because you never know. We're selecting groups. We're not selecting individuals, because they have to be psychologically matched, and they have to have a complementary skill set. So if one person of the group gets ill, for instance, the whole group is no longer allowed to go. So just before departure, our experts will decide of those 10 groups, or maybe there's just 8 left or 5 left of the initial 10, which groups are suitable to go. And then we'll ask the audience again to select their favorite group. But every 2 years we're adding 4 or more astronauts to the pool of astronauts. That will always have a pool of astronauts ready. And I think that this will continue until someone who's very rich can afford a ticket to go to Mars. Yeah, so many. The organization?
Well, I'll come to the radiation question, because I would just want to know, how do you make sure that the people that you send are actually still alive when they get there? Which also has a bit to do with the question if, even if they get there, if they can still get children, because we know all what radiation can do to a man's body. So.
Yeah, there have been studies by ESA and NASA on how much radiation you would get on a Mars trip, and I think that radiation is in the literature a somewhat exaggerated problem. It's a big issue. You have to take care of it. You have to engineer for protection against radiation. But ESA and NASA studies have shown that 20 grams per square centimeter of radiation protection during a solar proton event, so 20 centimeters of water, would protect you even from the biggest solar flare ever in 1972. So they will have a shelter which will have even more protection than that for during a solar flare. And for the rest of the way, they can be outside. They will sleep inside the radiation shelter, so they will have very good radiation protection. And these ESA and NASA studies actually show that it's worse for the body to smoke than to have a return mission to Mars, and that's a return mission. And you can see it's in the FAQ on our website. It's well explained. On Mars, there's also higher radiation, and we'll put a layer of sand on top of the habitat to protect them against this radiation.
Thanks. I do not have a question. I have got few ideas. At the beginning, I want to say that I really like this idea, this project, and I started to think how to help you already. However, in my opinion, because this project is controversial, you know, you are going to do something like one-way ticket to Mars. So just for public, I think that you could be open for an ideas to have more people into it. I know that you understand that you have to stick to one conception, you know, to do this in real. However, during this mission, because this is a long time, the conditions of the public, of the technology will change. So, for example, you could consider that, for example, when you land in 2023, after 10 years you will be able to make a return mission to Earth, because you will have a technology for this, for that. You will create a fuel on Mars, and etc., etc. And I think people will like to do this in way. The same, like, to be open on, power supplies like nuclear and etc., etc. I think that you will have more fans of that in this way.
Yep, thanks. So we are of course open to new technologies, but we're not an aerospace company, so we're not building any component in Mars One itself. We're finding suppliers for every component. So as soon as there's a technology available that has been tested and that's ready to fly, of course we'll try to make use of it. So for instance, if someone can offer us a return mission, we're very interested. And if all the technologies that are useful for us, we'll keep an eye on them. But we have to present a plan that's possible with current technologies. And this is what we're selling. Of course, any company has to adjust its plans to the changing reality of the real world. And we will do that too. Thanks.
One more question, please.
First of all, before I say anything else, I want to say well done for having a big idea, doing something about it, taking a risk. But I actually have so many questions, and since I've had my hand up for so long, I'm going to ask a whole bunch of them, which you don't have to answer now, but I'd be interested in. Firstly, how are you going to feed them? Like, will you have enough food to keep them alive for long enough for it not to just seem like you're sending people to their deaths? Secondly, astronauts that have been on the space station for 6 months come down in a Soyuz capsule and have to be carried out because, they're a little bit worse for wear. If they have just spent however long it is getting to Mars, how do you know that their bones and muscles are going to be... Who's going to pull them out? Who's going to be, will they even be able to stand up? Will they be physically able to go explore on Mars? Thirdly, I've seen how these talent shows work, and when there's somebody really annoying, they make great television. So they get voted in all the time, because it makes great television. Do you really want to spend the rest of your life traveling to Mars and living on Mars with somebody, like... Also, if somebody has said... Hang on, there was another one that was good. Oh! Broadcasters, do you have an ethicist on your team? Because I've worked for several broadcasters, and certainly in the UK, just showing somebody dying is a big thing. Like, if something happens up there and people are not well, do you think the broadcasters are still going to want to keep showing that? What will the public's opinion be? And you say, oh, it's going to be on. People can keep watching it for 50 years, but there are some pretty sharp issues here. Oh, that was it. Mars 500, where a man travelled, or didn't travel to Mars, came back. If you asked him before he went into Mars 500, he would say yes, he'd go on a one-way mission. And if you ask him when he comes out, he said he would never want to do it because you have to have the hope of living.
Well, yeah, so these are good questions. We'll have food production units inside, so they will grow their own food. There's the light. So they will have a basically unlimited supply of food. If something goes wrong there, then they can use the emergency supplies that they've taken with them. Your second one was, how do they feel on Mars? Well, as your neighbor has explained, the Soyuz capsule is a very bumpy ride. There's easier ways to come down, and those will affect the body less. And don't forget, on Mars they will have much less gravity, only 40%. So they'll lose about. There have been studies that the person who lost most muscle mass lost about 20% muscle mass, and bone mass about 11% after staying for 6 months on the ISS. We're flying 7 months to Mars, so it will be comparable. So they will actually be superhumans on Mars because they will have only 10% or 20% less bones and muscles, and they'll have 40% less gravity, so they'll feel twice as strong. And of course, there's getting used to gravity again, but a less bumpy ride down than a Soyuz capsule will help a lot there. Your third one was, do you remember? Ah, yeah, dying is important, yeah. So, obviously there are ethical aspects here, but don't forget that when we explored the world, many centuries ago, or several centuries ago, this was also a dangerous thing to do, and oh yeah, no, and as I already explained, of course, if people are dying, it's not something that we are going to broadcast. These are our colleagues and our friends, and you wouldn't broadcast that. And good contracts. No, yeah, absolutely. So of course, yeah. No, but don't forget that this is, in reality TV, the first Big Brother was actually pretty sweet. I don't know, where are you from? I'm from the Netherlands. So you saw the first one, and it was actually pretty sweet. I mean, it was actually really boring. If you would show it now, nobody would watch. And the only thing that was exciting about it was the first time that people were being followed 24/7. Reality TV is in itself not a bad thing. You can follow an Olympic athlete in his preparations for the Olympics, and it's reality TV. The bad thing that happens nowadays in reality TV is Jersey Shore, where they have all kinds of crazy contests, discussing things. Actually, I've never seen it, so maybe I should stay close. So in Big Brother nowadays, they put conflicting characters because they know it will give good television with fights and things getting out of hand. These people will be selected to cooperate very well together. The exciting thing about this is not the conflict in the humans, but it's the exploration. Everybody in the world is interested in seeing such big steps being made. And that's what it will be about. It will not be about fights or sex. No, that's not true, because this is exciting enough by itself. You don't, in something this big, I don't... There's an email address on our website. Yeah, I think someone's getting up. There's an email address on our website. We read all the mails we get, so feel free to send us mails and start a discussion. I look forward to it. And maybe if I'm somewhere for a next presentation, let's continue this argument. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bas. I think it was a very interesting session to end SpaceUp EU with. A lot of questions will pop up, I'm sure, and the discussion will go on, I'm also sure.